Okay, Star Wars fans, I think we are live here now on Twitch. One second. Well, Mike Kessling got up to give his cat some medicine, but we should be good to go here for Greg Shaw and Steve Baroni once they set up the table here. I see that Greg and Steve are both here, and they should be ready to go in just a minute. I've got if anyone's watching and wants to let me know if you can hear us clearly, that would be always helpful. I think my mic audio keeps cutting in and out. Testing. No, my mic is good here. Okay. 1 second.
I'm back.
Cool. I think they're ready. Do you want to just get started? Let me let them know. Streaming is ready for you. Yeah, I see both Greg and Steve were just chatting there. If anyone watching wants to let me know, can you hear my audio okay?
So Steve chose light.
Steve has chosen light. So, what do you think he's going to be on?
We are anticipating Legend as his most likely light side.
Yeah, that's definitely what he's played the most recently. He was pretty dominant in his Texas Mini World pod with Legend. I think he ended up going 4-0 with a plus 100 differential or something like that. But he didn't register Legend for his Texas Mini World round 1, right?
Correct. He registered. I don't think they actually played the match, but he registered Rebel Strike Team actually for his top 16 match against Joe.
Interesting. I don't know the last time I've seen someone play Rebel Strike Team. Could certainly take him by surprise, I guess.
Yeah, it had a couple Jedi presence in it. It was like 4 or 5 of Destiny 6 Luke. It looks like an interesting deck.
Yeah, it sounds like something that might be tuned pretty nicely for ISB, right? Basically, get the jump on them if they try to, reload on you.
That's exactly what I think his game plan was. So we're just waiting on Greg at this point.
Yeah, I don't know where he went. Probably it's fairly early for when
he had commented, "Let's just do 8:30." I know they're playing in a stream. I'm guessing he got up to get some coffee or use the restroom or do something before the game started.
Makes sense. Steve might be kind of eager to get the first game done. I don't think they set the time for the second game, but I bet if they can play game 1 in less than an hour, he might just suggest they go ahead and jump to game 2. All right, so they're ready to go. Let me look into the game here. All right, and we're off. So we have ISB from Greg and Throne Room from Steve.
So interesting to see if this will be a similar Guts Throne Room that we saw the other night, or if it's going to be a traditional Throne Room.
Yeah, you were on that stream. Tell me a little bit. There's some Guts. So tell me a little bit about this Guts list.
So assuming it's very similar to what Matt was playing, it's a deck with a bunch of ability 3 rebels and Jedi presence, and is pretty well tuned against the ISB reload deck as well as any sort of scum build. So we expected Legend, but this was very much on our radar. Sure. Justin was playing this yesterday in some casual games, at least one that we saw, and so we discussed that he could be trying to get some intel from Steve.
And of course, it's obviously the deck that Greg lost to, right? So, I mean, just for the context, Greg lost to Matthew Harrison Trainer playing this exact deck just the other day. So Do you feel like that when Greg lost that matchup, that it was a tactical mistake, or that this deck, or that this Guts throne room is very well tuned for beating it?
I think that Greg was probably a little bit taken by surprise the other day. This is again the big blue ISB,
Right.
which I think is better positioned than the reload ISB.
Mm-hmm.
Greg will know what's coming this time, and he's not playing the exact same list from the other night. So, hopefully some of those changes that we made will be beneficial. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Some of it's going to come down to Steve's activation as well. We saw he just played quite a mercenary to pull Chewbacca, and he also played Where Are You Looking For Me to get 3PO. So he's fetched 2 guys out of his deck. Always good to get 3PO in the first turn. It'd be interesting to see what the rest of his hand does.
Yeah. Of course, throne room always being very dependent on its getting its activation early in its opening hand. Interesting to see the. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Greg's not exactly playing a fast ISB either, so that does take some of the pressure off to allow some time for Steve to find it.
Right. Interesting to see the Chewbacca Protector out of Throne Room. I feel like you don't see that Chewie played very much outside of Diplo.
And it's good against General Veers, right?
Is that right? Is he power 3?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe that's why.
So that's already a better. It may have been in Matt's list too, but that's a pretty key card against getting around General Veers and the Walker, which is really the best game plan this ISB has for even having a ground presence.
Right. Well, and also, he can just be a 2 deploy 6 power guy that you double up his power with Jedi Presence, right? So.
Yeah, worst. that's never bad stuff. Yeah,
but exists as a pretty good option. So we see.
We see the home one document out,
Yep.
and then 3PO as well.
Yep. Pretty. So, but we have not seen a obviously, it's still in its deploy, but we don't see a JCC or a Boss Noss chamber yet. So obviously, for this ISB, if Greg wasn't facing Throne Room, he would obviously be starting mobilization points to grab Executor, right?
Correct. So one change at least, he now has another polar for the Executor along with Force Pushes and Tarkin's Bounty and whatnot. So hopefully that'll help him expedite finding Executor.
Right.
But yes, obviously the deck would much prefer to be starting mob points to be able to pull naturally.
Right. Now, I think against a traditional Throne Room list, the advantage that you would have with this deck is that you have very heavy space, right? So the idea is that you would crowd out space and not have to fight on the ground at all, ideally.
Very true. So that's pretty much what happened the other night. Is it came down to a pretty big space battle, or standoff in space, I would say. The home one came down. Lots of guys came down as pilots. Greg was pulling walkers onto his Executor through his battle deployment.
Mm-hmm.
And then ended up shuttling down to the ground, which was the move that Joe in particular did not endorse at the time. And there's no Gick in this ISB deck, so I wouldn't be surprised to down to the ground, which was a similar play in this game, knowing the Jedi Presence beat down there is a possibility.
Right. Yeah, no, Gick is tough, right? I don't remember the last time I made a list without Gick or Hoojix in
it. Yeah, that's fair. I don't think I can either. I mean, this is a pretty unique deck in that you're stacking a big Star Destroyer or you're stacking a Walker. Like the odds of actually taking overflow against most decks are very slim.
Yeah. And it is one thing that I've realized since I've come back to playing a lot of Star Wars recently is it's very easy to be like, well, every deck should have Gick or Hoojix, but I mean, 60 cards, it's really tough to play every card you want to play. And especially I think in pretty modern Star Wars where you really see a lot of cards in your deck, right? You can go through a lot of cards. You have things like Rescuing the Clouds. You have a lot of cycling sort of interrupts that, I mean, every card slot really counts. So we see that
completely agree.
Rescuing the Clouds was just grabbed by something special planned for them. So that I assume obviously is Greg's flex starting effect when he doesn't have the ability to start or can't confidently start mob points because it'll be suspended.
And that's likely a card Steve's playing 2 or 3 of.
Yeah.
So never a bad thing to hook.
Yep. Yeah, pretty standard. Standard for Throne Room to at least have 3 rescue in the clouds. And also, what other target? I mean, obviously he has the defensive shield to grab a second thing, but I mean, are there any other good targets out of Throne Room generally? Or what other recycling interrupts would be playing?
Well, some Throne Rooms could have a Rebel Leadership.
Yep.
Or 2. You may want to save your Allegations grab for something that could get played out of your lost pile with solo. That's something abusive. Generally, though, rescue is one of the best grabs.
So we see Greg deploy Piet to the Executor, which lets him tutor up Merge, and Merge will then let him deploy a Battleground system for reserve.
Dan was doing this the other day too. His name is Merrick, I think.
Merrick?
He just has R's in the middle of his name.
I guess that's fair. The tennis player's name is Djokovic, right? Not Djokovic. So
yeah.
I'll accept that.
There's definitely no way it's like Majeric, or I feel like I've heard every person say his name differently.
Sure. The lack of vowels, I'll give you is almost for sure. Right, so Greg basically just sets up some activation this turn, playing Piet and Merrick, getting out Bespin, but he does not have either the free Executor effect or the Executor in his hand.
I imagine Greg is not thrilled seeing this Throne Room build for the second game in a row with high stakes. Anticipating Legend both times and kind of swerving into a deck that fights you on a completely different axis, and really just by merits of taking away mob points can slow this already sort of slow ISP down considerably.
Yeah, because another very important thing that he doesn't get from mob points now is he controls a docking bay, but he's not getting the +2 activation. And this ISP list does not, because it doesn't seem to have Mustafar and Mustafar's Castle, doesn't have the same sort of stable activation that you get from the ISP reload. Like it really, needs to use mob points, and it really wants to play its Executor for 2 force early on to take advantage of its lower activation.
The Agents of Black Sun was the other deck that he was considering, and I'm sure he, at this point, somebody just messaged us that my face is frozen on the stream. I don't know that it matters, but hopefully people can still hear me.
It's not in the chat. Paul, I see you in the chat because you're suggesting how we should be pronouncing Merrick Marajic. Can you hear us okay? I'll make sure.
I think people can hear us. I think it's just that my video itself is frozen, which is interesting. It's not frozen on Discord.
Yeah.
I would say spend minimal amount of time fixing it. Otherwise, just minimize, make the video much larger.
Yeah.
Minimize my frozen face.
You're just so shocked that Greg has to face this matchup again.
So here we see Galen Urso coming down to the home 1 docking bay.
What do you think Galen Urso is? He's there. So he can cancel the free effect, right? The first time that Greg tries to play it.
Yes, so They Must Never Again Leave This City is not immune to alter.
Right.
So,
which we see right here.
Would not be at all be surprised to now see Galen say, put that away.
Right. And it's unique, right? So it sets him back another turn.
Potentially. He may not actually even have the Executor.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have just been playing that to bait it, give himself more time to find the Executor and get another copy of the effect. He's playing 4 or 5 copies of the effect.
Right,
so
as a standard, yeah.
Once Galen's out there, there's no harm in just throwing out the effect since he knows he's going to use his game text.
Right. And still, Steve has not found Boss Nass's chamber yet, so we're still at a relatively lower activation for Throne Room. Do you think this Guts Throne Room build has any viability outside of a ISB heavy meta. Like it seems like a deck that is very heavily tuned for, I guess, ISB and core, right?
In CCT as well.
Right. So scum deck.
Which right now really are the 3 best dark sides.
Right. Yeah, it'll be.
So it seems very well positioned now. It's going to be interesting to see how it transitions with whatever's in the new set, along with all the errata. Like losing Walkling also seems potentially pretty detrimental.
Right.
But we'll see. Throne Room has been resilient and been a deck for almost as long as the game has been around. So I'm not convinced that. I think Throne Room will be knocked down by the lack of Walkling, but I don't think it's necessarily going away. But it could morph into something more like this platform that's more aggressive, less controlling than the traditional Throne Room.
Yeah, because at least traditional Throne Room for the last couple months has been really poor against ISB. And since ISB has been the top dark deck. Now we're going to see that ISB is about to get knocked down pretty heavily. So Paul, I see you're mentioning that Walkling's being taken away. Yeah, there's a whole list of announcements for new errata that will actually be taking place as of like October 15th. So Paul, in particular, for your OCS round 2, you want to make sure you have this errata in mind. But yeah, Walkling is being taken away from Throne Room, so it'll still be played in basically every light side deck that isn't Throne Room. But then there's also several other erratas, including to ISB and No Idea.
All of these changes, Paul asked in the chat where he can read about them, have been announced on the forum. I'll find it and put a link in the chat.
Thanks.
I think part of the problem is that the thread it's in is called flattening the curve and not something specific announcing.
Yeah, and I think there will be probably on the 15th when it goes legal. There's normally an actual like pinned announcement that has all the errata.
Right.
But from what I understand, talking to our inside sources and on the GIMP team, like this errata should be in place basically day of that they announce it.
Which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, fantastic work by Jeremy and Adam and the whole team. So we see Boss Nass's chamber. So Greg is basically drawn up to 15 cards. He's obviously digging for something. Okay, so now we see Leia has been deployed to the Executor, threatening a beatdown versus Piet and Merrick.
Which he only has 5 cards in hand. I can't anticipate 10 force to go. I don't anticipate this to be a true beatdown.
Yeah, but with the Leia attrition ad, he's almost guaranteed to clear the 2 of them. I guess not guaranteed, but relatively high destinies. He should be able to clear these 2.
It's very likely. I'm just saying it's unlikely he's going to take any overflow, but he will likely clear the site.
Right.
Okay, base. Now it's possible that overflow is in play.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah.
One other thing about this ISP deck is it doesn't play a lot of characters, honestly, especially relative to the Trooper ISP version.
Right.
So killing these 2 guys goes a long way into also actually protecting him in space, because Greg won't have a ton of pilots that he can leverage.
We see Greg play I Can't Shake Him here, so those base shots will at least cost 1 each. But Steve still has 4 force up, so if he just wanted to pass battle, he could still shoot twice here.
I'm turning into a meme because of my frozen face here, Drew. So thank you for that.
I'm sorry. I meant to focus there. You comment, and I'll focus on trying to fix this. So.
Okay, so we see I Can't Shake Him from Greg, just to you make sure that if he's going to fire that cannon twice, he's going to have to, at least once, he's going to have to use a force, just trying to make Steve use more of his resources. He fires at the commander, and he is hit and will be forfeit 0. I imagine. Okay, so he added a destiny to power using Leia, which, given the circumstance, he's at 15-5. The power destiny definitely makes more sense.
Right.
I don't anticipate an action really from Greg here. I imagine Greg is not thrilled with the situation. So he draws low on his power destiny,
That's good.
but Greg is going to have a fairly good destiny to not take. Okay,
He draws
so
low
that's
on it.
about one as well for Greg as it possibly could have.
Yeah, but unfortunately for Greg, Steve will forfeit first, which means Baze will get to fire again. So,
We see a dark time to subtract 1 from that, make him lose a force. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see. Typically, this is the grab against ISB, or with Throne Room, you often want to grab a dark time, but I would be surprised to see Steve grab it here.
Right.
Yeah. The reason being, he knows this deck. It plays 4 Imperial Command, and that's really the much more relevant grab.
Yeah, and also I think it's tough to grab something when you only have 3 cards in hand and only 2 more force after that. Like
2 more force.
Yeah, I mean,
and he's going to have to pay 1 to shoot again.
Yeah, and so he's basically giving Greg a whole turn to then be able to reset up, and you really want to draw a card or 2 there. I don't know how to unfreeze you. I think the best thing I could do is probably just close that feed and reopen it. Do you want to do that, or do you want to remain a meme for the time being?
I don't care. It's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal either. I could also remove your image and still just have audio.
Yeah, I would just do that. Then people can see you.
Well, no, they're not going to see me. They would just see.
Nobody cares about seeing us. Just take us off. As long as they can hear us, who cares?
Okay, 1 second.
Then you can pick your nose in peace.
Oh, please.
All right, so Greg chooses not to draw Battle Destiny, which isn't that shocking given exactly the point that you mentioned, is that let's say he draws low, that allows Steve to forfeit Baze and shoot PS. He's then taking substantial overflow. This way he's just mitigating his losses and saying I'm going to take 6 overflow.
Right. I mean, it could be. I mean, it doesn't look great for Greg to obviously lose these guys and 6 force this turn, but at least he gets to, feel pretty confident that Steve has emptied out what he's got, and Steve's going to have to spend the whole next turn to draw cards in order to reload. And we see that Greg is just peeling off the top. He peeled Mobilization Point, Stormtrooper Garrison, Colonel Wolf Yularen, Lat Damage, Gideon, and
so a whole bunch of characters.
Yeah. Which,
again, as we were saying, this deck doesn't have a ton of characters. Greg is going to really have to prioritize flipping and then hoping to retrieve some of those, but he seems a long way off from that at this point. He does have a 12-card hand to Steve's 3-card hand. Those guys are also likely stranded at that docking bay for at least a turn or 2. We'll see. Unless, he's going to have to decide, does he want to replenish his hand or move those guys elsewhere, which right now there's not even a battleground docking bay to move them to.
Yeah, and we did see that Steve lost a first aid combo, so that would have been one way he could have moved them. He shuttled over Galen Urso, so he can jump around to different docking bays, but the battleground site is not available.
Well, he can shuttle 2 there for free from the home 1 docking bay, but to leave the executor docking bay costs 7 force.
Oh, that's
right. Which is hefty, especially when you have a 4-card hand.
Right. Yes, we know it's a great pause face on Mike. We're not sure what's going on because our Discord looks fine. I don't know why it froze here, but as long as you guys hear our audio, we're gonna stick with it.
Okay, so we see another free executor effect.
Okay.
Question will be, has Greg actually found the executor as well?
I would think so.
And here it is.
Yeah, there's not really an advantage to him just playing that effect and passing. It just would give Steve an opportunity to find an altar, possibly.
Agreed. The only rationale is if he hasn't found it, and for some reason he's also concerned about Grimtosh, like he might have been trying to clear a card out of his hand.
That's very reasonable. But you would expect altar from this list, right? Especially if it's being tuned for ISP.
I think so. It's not a slam dunk, but I think that you would be wise to play around it or to anticipate it. So, it's very likely that you might want it because of strategic reserves anyway, and then the ancillary benefit of being able to alter the executor effect is helpful. So Chiranu comes down. So notably, Coward now shuts off any ability for Steve to do damage.
Yep.
And Greg will be answering with a drain of 2. The
Yep.
real question to me is like, okay, so he's drawing up. Hopefully, we saw an I Can't Shake Him from him on the previous turn. He saves 4 force, so it's very possible he has another I Can't Shake Him in hand to pull out, like a Paltridium or the other Laren.
Yeah, good. Well, would you want to grab Yularen here? I mean, he really wouldn't activate any force, right?
I would one Paltridium.
Yeah, Paltridium would let him both draw a card either off the top or redraw that I Can't Shake Him. That's correct, right? You get the I Can't Shake Him in the use pile when you play Paltridium.
I don't know the exact sequencing. The interrupt would have to resolve, and then I assume that you would get it, because I think it would resolve and then he would enter the battlefield, but I could be wrong.
But regardless, Paltridium would be very useful just to help him draw a card. Potential. Okay, so we see I Can't Shake Him. Let's see what he's gonna pull here. And you suggested Yularen. We saw Wolf go to peeled off the top of Greg's reserve when he was losing cards, but you said it seems pretty likely that ISB would run 2 of them, right?
Yes, the additional activation he provides is just really strong. He's also low deploy, high forfeit. He's the kind of card you wouldn't mind recycling. So I know that Greg is playing 2 of him.
So we see Paltridium come out as we were talking, and we now have learned, as we perhaps should have known as frequent ISB players, that I Can't Shake Him is the top card of the use pile after you've played Paltridium. So
yes,
right,
so
Greg drew top of
plan to recycle it did not.
Yeah. That would be a little abusive if you could just cycle that card every turn. I Can't Shake Him is a fantastic card in general, though. Very good in ISB, but in these matchups, like it really does come down to every force, and making Throne Room have to pay for its weapons is not insignificant.
Yeah, there are times that it can be very game swinging. You use a lot of your force to deploy an EPP and a Luke or things like that, and then you're planning to battle, and your opponent plays that, and sometimes it can make you not even want to battle at all. I mean, it can really change the tempo of a game drastically.
It's a great hate card also against Leia's blaster rifle, which ISB can have some struggles with, making them have to pay 2 to use that.
So we see Greg at drain for 2 here, and Steve basically he loses a speak with the Jedi Council and a Lisa from hand. So that's
standard first force losses from Throne Room, the polars for sites you already have in play.
Yeah, that's exactly what you would hope to be able to lose from hand at this point in the game if you're Steve.
So when Greg played Matt before, what was the space package that Matt had?
He was playing a big home 1, so it had launching the assault, home 1, Akbar. I think he had a Hera, Screaming Lando. He had Wedge, Road Squadron Leader. He had Derek Hobby Clivian to cancel Battle Destiny.
So he was really focused on space.
It was he went fully loaded up to space.
Interesting. So we see Imperial Decree V. Why do you think Greg would play that card here when he's not facing any sort of direct damage from Steve?
That's a good question. I myself may have lost that to a drain. I'm not totally sure that it's buying him enough utility to warrant the life force.
Right. Could be maybe I don't think he could be doing it this turn, but maybe he wants to empty cards out of his hand for when he plays Tarkin, right? So he effectively loses a force to draw a card.
Fair. He's at 9 cards in hand, so he's got a lot more to blow through. So here is one notable change between the other night and today. The game really came down to like a Imperial Command versus Rebel Leadership battle in space, and you only have so many commands. So Guri is a walking, talking command that is helping to pilot the Executor now, and that's going to make it very difficult for Steve to actually get through even the immunity to attrition of the Executor.
Yeah, that's a fantastic card here. The asymmetrical limitation of Battle Destinies, because obviously you see a lot of Imperial Justice out of ISB and other dark decks, but since that this ISB deck itself would want to be drawing multiple destinies, something like Guri, like you said, as a command replacement is really, really good. I cannot remember the last time I deployed Guri anywhere that wasn't on the Stinger, though.
That's fair, and paying the full hefty 6 force, but well worth it in this position for Greg.
I do believe that Guri's best friend Daro is an ISB agent. So,
and I believe we were trying to squeeze in a Duro and a Restraining Bolt. I'm not certain that all of that made it in.
What is Restraining Bolt for?
Specifically for BB-8.
Okay.
But it can also have utility against 3PO.
R2 is immune to Restraining Bolt, correct?
I think it's immune to Restraining Bolt, Fire Extinguisher, and something else. But there's some abusive stuff that you can do with Fire Extinguisher and R2. So I know they thankfully made him immune to a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
Paul has said that the first case is blue steel with an emphasis on left cheek, which
I was gonna hide it, but then I realized the problem is that I don't know on the stream setup how to do that without turning off like the audio. Like it basically what it is I'm simulcasting the Chrome screens on top of each other, and so if I were to remove it, it would remove the commentary too. We'll just
let's not do that.
Yeah, we'll just have you kind of hang out at the bottom.
Greeting they everyone. Get to enjoy blue steel.
Exactly. Greet everyone on this lovely Saturday morning with blue steel.
All right, so I see Steve check his reserve deck. Yeah. Greg gets a verify, and Steve is probably thinking about what he needs to do here. He goes ahead and spends the 7 force to get his crew back over to the home 1.
Okay. Why would he do that?
So at this point, I mean, there's no docking bay for them to go to, so likely he's planning to eventually deploy the home 1 and move those guys up to the bridge, even as 4-foot fodder.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense.
And or then is a way to get them to Cloud City.
Right. Because he's going to have to be fighting at that system.
Yeah, I mean, Greg is playing a second system, but there's no incentive for him to deploy it at this point.
Right. And Steve would probably lose the damage race if he just goes to the site. Because this list almost assuredly doesn't have any force drain modifiers with lightsabers because it didn't start Titor to pull them.
Correct. And Greg is playing a Battleground docking bay, but notably it's I believe he may have removed it actually. So I think that he did remove it and replaced it with the Coruscant docking bay. On the other night, he was playing the Spaceport docking bay and deployed that to Coruscant. It is now the 1-0. I was just going to note, like, he's not playing the Cloud City Battleground docking bay. So that's a very big difference relative to the reload ISB.
Yeah, I mean, if he's really trying to, emphasize a heavy space game, he's going to want to limit any sort of battleground sites that they could be battling on.
So we see Maximilian come down onto the Executor, and so Chewbacca notably only works at sites. So thankfully, if they do end up on the home 1, he won't be blanking any of the pilot's text on the Executor.
Not that Veer's text obviously is particularly relevant, but yes.
No, he is adding 3 power.
But things like Ultridium is fairly relevant. Obviously you want to have him die and draw a card, or Guri stops multiple destinies, but in case there's an opportunity that he could hit multiple destinies, you're low. So.
Between Guri and Tridium, though, there's almost no way he's going to crack that Executor.
Right. So Steve, what would be Steve's best shot here then? If he can't crack this Executor, so we see home 1.
Yeah, I think it's exactly this. He's going to have to start getting into space, and I don't know how profitably he's going to be able to attack into this, to be honest with you. But I don't know that he has much of another choice.
Well, he gets to look at 17 cards in his use pile with Rey, so if he has good answers, he will find them.
Is there any better feeling than playing Rey with a huge use pile like that?
No.
It's like kid in a candy store. And then you also know that you're going to just be drawing free cards every turn.
Rey is perhaps the best character in the game, certainly the most versatile character in the game.
I think she is empirically the best character, but I mean, I can hear arguments for other cards, but To me, Ray is the best card.
Yeah.
So we see Admiral Akbar go down as well for free.
So it might be that the best plan that Steve has is that he wants to just load up this home one and just kind of have a staring contest and then get some characters to the site. And, basically start getting in a drain for one at the site.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he does exactly that or if he focuses on just loading up the home one.
Right.
I mean, right now he's still down by 6 power. Okay, you see Eller's Matic, who noticeably, I think, protects you from lateral damage.
And we did see lateral damage lost off the top of Greg's reserve deck, so not impossible that there's a second one. Though there's not a second system in play, so.
Right. Lateral damage would require the second system coming into play, which I don't think is also in Greg's best interest. So he'd have to have a second one, also play the system, and now it's a moot point because of Ellers.
Right. And he would.
And now you do see the guys start shuttling up from the bridge to the bridge.
It does look like that Steve's plan is to just get so much forfeit fodder at the Bespin system that it's really difficult for Greg to crack that. And then he can start getting some guys on the ground, and that's where we know Greg is a little bit weaker.
Noticeably, I mean, we're on turn 6, and ISB is still on the 0 side. I think, I mean, Greg, again, we've mentioned this deck doesn't have a ton of characters.
Yeah.
So one thing to note is if he does flip, I mean, now Steve is in a position to pull simple tricks as well. So it's not like Greg is necessarily going to be retrieving off his objective. So even flipping right now doesn't actually do anything.
Right. Yeah, Paul points out that he already lost Merc, which is actually relevant because in this deck with a low number of characters, that is an ISB agent that he was perhaps wanting to use to flip.
Right.
But we haven't seen, there's some heavy hitters we haven't seen. We haven't seen a Tarkin, we haven't seen Callus, we haven't seen Vandalay. So there's definitely guys in there.
The captain of industry.
5d6 RA7.
Another droid.
We already see the Veers that he played, just FYI. He's playing not the ISP agent Veers. He's playing the Veers that draws 2 destinies on the AT-AT.
So now, I mean, Greg can very profitably attack with 2 other ISB agents there and Tarkin.
So he plays Vandalay, and then... Sorry, I had it wrong. So Vandalay gets played at Executive 2. Steve pulled the wrong.
Steve pulls another pathetic life form, which is definitely not an intentional shield pull.
Yeah, obviously. What do you think I guess we'll see in a moment, but what shield do you think he's going for there?
I anticipate he'll want simple tricks.
Yeah, of course. So we have about as large a Doom stack versus as large a Doom stack as you can get at Bespin. But as you're saying, with the Destiny canceling, Guri plus Tarkin is powerful. He's not going to crack attrition on a home run, but he can at least start initiating battles that he could be winning by 6 to 10 and forcing Steve to slowly peel off some forfeit.
Right. It's like if he can draw a 4 or so and win the battle by 10 force and each time be turning through 2 guys, that's pretty profitable for Greg.
He plays Imperial Command here to add a Destiny. Always a great time to play your Imperial Command when your opponent does not have a grabber open. And we see Steve respond with leadership to keep Greg at 1, but this does give Greg the opportunity to grab the leadership. So probably a good tactical play there by Greg in order to at least get a grab. Basically, he probably anticipated that his command would be limited by leadership, but at least he baited out the leadership so he could grab it.
Yeah, he forces him to use it in a position where the command is not going to be grabbed, and then he gets the benefit of grabbing the leadership.
And Steve adds a Destiny to power with Leia Organa. And now we get to see Greg using 5d6 to draw a card in response to that.
So, yeah, let's highlight 5d6. I forget all. So on a 1 to 3, you can activate a force. On a 4 to 6, you can draw a top card of your deck. A 0 7, which are very unlikely, but you can retrieve a force.
Yeah.
He is notably a pilot, also.
Yeah. Oh, we see Dark Time again. So Greg getting in some extra damage without the Dark Time being grabbed. So 26 to 3, Greg draws a 2 Agent Callus, which he can take into hand with Vandalay. Oof, womp womp. Draws the Keshik for a 0. So it's only, assuming he cancels the Battle Destiny with Tarkin, is just going to be down by 3 for Steve's only down by 3.
Which is still going to be a character or 3
force. Right?
Some overflow.
Yeah.
And
he got Callus
notably,
into hand.
5d6 allowed him to activate another. It got Callus into hand. 5d6 allows him to activate another force here.
Obviously, perhaps the most important thing in the battle, he got to grab leadership. He got to bait out a leadership that was grabbed. So there's some real benefits here to Greg. Battle.
Jared said, "This is deja vu." I'm feeling the same way. If you had told me that this was the matchup, I will say I probably would have said I'm not necessarily all that interested in. I would have given my cat his medicine and gone back to sleep. But
if you would like to go back to sleep now, we can take your frozen screen off the bottom of the left hand here and get this audio commentary yet.
now that I'm this far, I'm awake now. There's no way I'll be.
And you love spending time with me, Mike. That's the real reason. So.
I mean, that is true. It is odd that you're now 30 minutes away instead of halfway around the world.
Yeah,
and we're still having to do this.
And it makes absolutely no difference because the world is gone to shit. For those just tuning in, we apologize. We know that the video feed, only the video, not the audio feed for Mike and I's cams have gotten frozen somehow between Streamlabs and Discord. But since the game on GIMP is going live and you can hear us fine, we'll just keep going with it as audio commentary.
So here we see Steve activate, and seems like he's thinking about what his next line should be.
Yeah, he definitely has to get to a site because he has to at least start getting drains in, and with Coward out, or I'm sorry, with Simple Tricks out, at least Greg won't be retrieving anything. But it's tough because he also probably just needs more piloting power on home 1, because otherwise he's just going to be basically effectively eating a drain every turn or losing a guy.
Right. So he's at a point where it's like, yes, he does want to go to ground, but how well can he actually commit resources to having enough on the ground to drain, to not be exposed to walkers, even though Veers is in space, and then to have enough to go in space and not have to lose multiple dudes each battle.
Right. Yeah, and obviously, if this was a more traditional throne room list, you'd probably expect something like R2 to come down to the force of 2-0 and then start threatening a large drain. But the problem is that, at least from what I understand, this list that Matt played the other day did not have R2. So Steve's list also doesn't have R2. He doesn't have that ability to threaten a large drain while trying to still stabilize in space.
Yeah, and notably the battleground docking bay change then is pretty huge.
Right.
I think it also helps that Greg has experience playing a game against this deck, and I would imagine that Steve has limited experience, given that it's only really been a known quantity for 36 hours.
Right. Now, it's still a great meta call, and Steve was probably, hoping that Greg would roll out the reload version of ISB, and they would be fighting a lot on the ground, and he'd be fairly advantaged there. So we see Yoda keep their piece, which will now limit Greg to win. Basically, we have Guri versus Guri. Now, I'm going to remember Yoda
And we see Wedge come down. I don't believe on that stack of guys that he has a Rogue Squadron pilot yet.
Let's see. I believe that is correct. I don't think Ellers Madoc got promoted to Rogue Squadron.
So just to remind everyone what's on the home one, we have Ray, Akbar, Ellers Madoc, 3PO with his parts showing, Galen Urso, Chewbacca Protector, Yoda, and now Wedge.
So it's pointed out that Yoda does make it moot in the sense that Tarkin can't cancel Yoda's battle destiny, and Wedge can't. So this is important to understand. These cards aren't mirrors. So Yoda makes it so that Wedge basically doesn't work. Wedge can't cancel a destiny because Yoda says those destinies can't be canceled or modified.
Yeah.
But one advantage that Greg has is that Tarkin does allow for canceling of non-battle destinies. Tarkin cancels any destiny in the battle. And so he's at least still countering Leia's power, or I guess you put out attrition, but probably won't. So power attrition destiny.
Correct.
So
we see Greg play Agent Callus.
Yep.
So he's now looking at 2 cards. He takes Kashyyyk into hand and puts a Dark Time for the Rebellion back.
Makes sense.
So we won't see him draw that 0 again for Battle Destiny.
Yeah, he needs to, well, he's up by 5 now. Throne Room generally has a higher Destiny average than ISB will. Now, this version of Throne Room definitely seems to be a lower Destiny version. It has a lot of characters, which is naturally going to be lower Destiny. But still, Greg needs to fish that 0 out of his deck. If the rest of this game is basically going to be battling back and forth and just comparing power. So yeah, we see
it's
power.
It's a pretty thrilling game, huh?
Yeah, very thrilling. What sort of cards do you think could be played here to crack this open, basically? Like, dig deep. Like, what could you imagine would be like an unexpected blowout card from either side?
Well, I love laser cannon battery.
I think home one's got pretty decent armor, if I had to guess.
Right, so you would use it to play Relentless Pursuit and make him power 0.
There you go. Love it.
But
Also,
Greg's not playing with those cards.
3, you just have to draw 6. Not impossible.
Yeah, sadly, Greg is not playing this card, so don't foresee that.
See no end in sight to this.
So, as you predicted, he adds Battle Destiny to power. Adds Destiny to power. Tarkin cancels the 5 Destiny to power. Greg draws a Imperial Command, a 4 for Destiny. Steve draws Might of the Republic as a 5, which allows him to draw the top part of his deck with 5d6. And we end up in a situation where Steve has to lose a character, or 3 or 4 4s.
Yeah. So, I think we agree that if nothing else changes, Steve is at the disadvantage here. That he's behind on power, and I think probably Greg can keep finding more guys with I Can't Shake Him. And it seems like Greg just has more power and characters that add that pilot. But yeah, I mean, we've definitely hit a stalemate here.
Yeah, I think it does favor Greg at this point, but it's definitely not over by any means.
Oh, no.
It'll be very interesting to see what Steve's turn is like here. Very interesting might be overstating it. Noticeably, I mean, he is also cycling through his deck with 3PO, so whatever answers or other characters he has, you would think that while, yes, it is a lower Destiny version of the deck in general, he's at least probably putting back 4s and 5s that aren't necessarily too useful at the moment.
Right.
So we see EPP Han come down.
Now the power discrepancy is being so now he's ahead on power by adding Hera and Han. Hera can also let him he can't redraw because of Yoda, right?
He can't redraw because of Yoda.
Yeah. But being ahead on power is fairly relevant here, especially because he gets +1 to his destiny because of Rey.
Yeah, this is kind of what happened the other night, is that like it looked very positive for Greg in space, and then over time Matt was able to get enough power to where they were close and then actually pulled ahead in power.
So now, if you were Greg, you probably have to start really looking at that site. I mean, the site is very advantage to Greg if he can hold it, right? It'll become a drain 2 site because of the objective, assuming there's an ISB agent there. And it'll also let him then satisfy simple tricks and nonsense, so he can start retrieving guys. So even if he starts being behind on battle here and he's losing 1 guy per battle, he could be retrieving a guy and draining for 2.
I don't know that he has enough characters to actually go effectively to the site without reducing his power drastically in space.
That's an interesting point.
So again, he's going to draw the 5 for Destiny to Power. Expect Karkin will cancel this.
Yeah. Taco asked about the clocks. Greg is at 33 minutes. Steve is at 27 minutes. So even though this looks like a game that's taking obviously a very long time with a lot of different characters and solo play, these are both players who know what they're doing, and they're still playing it fairly quickly. I mean, we are on turn 8. That was quite immersive.
We're in turn 8,
by the way.
I actually think time could end up being a factor in this game, and Greg has a 6-minute advantage.
Yeah, it's a double quite a mercenary in this list. That's very interesting. My guess is that you play 2 quite a mercenaries because you're really concerned about the court space package, and in particular Pandababa adding to attrition. That's one way you can crack home one's attrition.
And to your point, just Chewbacca Protector in a deck with Jedi Presence is pretty good stats.
Yeah.
And if he happen to be playing the Walker version that he is, like canceling Maximilian's text is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, and also we did earlier see a Might of the Republic for Leia, so I think it's the deck list is trying to tune its destinies a little bit higher by playing polars for those characters, right? So it has naturally slightly lower destinies than Throne Room normally would because it's not redrawing Luke Skywalker Rebel Scout, and so by playing 5s to pull out your guys, that helps. So we see Greg is just going to lose cards from hand, which obviously something like They Must Never Again Leave the City is not particularly useful at this stage in the game.
Yeah, he also lost a Force Push off the top of his deck and then a Command off the top of his deck.
Yeah, neither of which are probably doing too much. I don't know what he would need to Force Push for at this point. Like, do you feel like there's one specific card that would be very helpful for him that he doesn't have yet?
Not that comes to mind. I'm going to pull up the latest image of the deck he posted in Slack and see if anything jumps out to me. But off the top of my head, no.
Well, if we could find a Walker, like if we can get that Blizzard 4 and get Veers on there. I mean, it does feel like, well, he doesn't have a lot of characters. Greg can at least have some confidence that Steve has used a lot of guys already. And so he might be able to feel a little bit safer going down to the site.
Fair.
So isn't that what you said happened when he played Matt, right? He kind of, in his first foray into the site, he got Jedi Presence right out.
Yeah, it wasn't immediate, but yes, he did eventually get Jedi Presence out, and Matt got to like power 50 against about power 15.
And again, we know this deck doesn't play a Gick, so. Just a quick check on the life totals. We got 19 force and life for Greg, and we got 18 force for Steve. 8 cards in hand for Greg, 10 for Steve.
Yeah, I was like, don't forget the hand counts.
Yeah, so we're definitely at a pretty close parity here. So we see Stalker.
And that helps Greg pull ahead. This a similar situation happened the other day. So notably, what's different here is Greg played Stalker, went from a behind position here to pull back and ahead in cards. And so, I mean, if he doesn't play this, he's going to be losing a guy or some force every battle.
Right.
If he does play this, he's still committed now to losing a character pretty much every battle because the Stalker doesn't have immunity.
Right.
But he had to get this additional power on the table.
Right. Right. So basically, he wants her to be parity in guys lost. Right. He'll lose a guy every turn as long as Steve is also losing a guy every turn. Checking reserve decks with rest order.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list. Honestly, there's not. He has a third Star Destroyer. So being able to play that, if he can get that out, it'd be substantial. He has Vengeance as well.
Vengeance, okay.
So
yeah,
that could be significant power increase.
And also with force loss when he keeps winning the battles.
Yes, good point. Outside of that, I'm not seeing much that jumps out. So here we do see Greg initiate battle. This is going to turn into a very wash, rinse, repeat type game.
I mean, it's wash, rinse, and repeat, but both these players are very good, and they would know who would be favored in that situation.
I'm certain they're both well aware of like how each turn one person's taking the upper hand based on what they're deploying. It's right. So in that way, it is kind of interesting to see the back and forth. It's just not the most dynamic game for viewing.
So how do you think the meta is going to shift after these erratas?
It's really I'm not on playtesting, so I don't know what's coming out in the next set. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to say because we know there's also going to be a substantial amount of new cards. So good news there is like it seems like the meta should shift.
But there is at least a couple of weeks. I mean, at the very least, round 2 of next round of OCS is going to be with the new meta of errata, but without a new set released.
Okay, well. I expect that we'll see. So Greg is specifying that he wants to lose Vandalay. He has so many cards there he doesn't want to misclick.
Yeah. I'm sure our master GIMP splicers will get on it sometime when it can be a higher priority. But yes, it's a difficulty of GIMP when you have large space battles, is you can't very cleanly click on individual characters. So
when I play, I'm terrified of misclicking anyway. With a stack like that, I would just be terrified.
Yeah, and we see Baroni being a good guy and telling him, "Oh, don't worry about that." I think any reasonable player who has played even a game or two on GIMP understands that. Yes, that's one thing that's a little.
That's fair. So I hadn't really thought, since I'm not playing the OCS, I hadn't thought about it. But the biggest change to me is the change to ISB is huge. It opens up. Well, it really takes the deck down a peg. So I anticipate you'll see a lot more court, a lot more CCT, and then who knows? I mean, entanglements. There's plenty of other decks that are very playable.
Point out that Steve he just pulled Corellian Corvette with Admiral Radis, so he actually did have wasn't sure if he was going to have the Corvette or not. Maybe Radis was just a zero deploy guy that he was going to float, but obviously if you're playing Radis, you probably do want a Corvette, and so we're going to see Steve add that to this deck here, which means we're back to power basically being equal, which again would favor Steve because he has higher average destiny and his destinies are +1. His overall destiny is +1 because of Ray.
Yes, so the Corvette puts him one ahead on power.
Yeah. Paul, you suggested the interesting thing maybe when is this effective? Round 2, game 1, between you and opponents agree to play your round 2 matches. I believe the plan, and I don't want to over promise, is for the errata to be effective basically day of. So they're going to announce it on formally have it on the 15th. And then the GIMP team already is working on coding this errata in the back end. And it should be as straightforward as on the 15th, early in the morning, there'll be some downtime. And then every game played in round 2 should have the errata.
So that's the notable part is that
of course
it'll be the full round 1, right? The full round 1 in the existing meta, and then round 2 moving forward in the OCS will be the new meta.
Correct. That's the plan. And obviously, can't promise that. But I think it's wise to assume if you're in round 2 that you'll be playing.
Well, and I think they had a lot of this errata ready to go for a while. They waited mostly for the integrity of Texas Mini Worlds to finish, to now say, here's what's happening, and it's impacting the OCS playoffs. But I think most people at least would probably be excited that the meta is changing. We've gone through weeks and weeks of lots of streams, and I can say I
We're tired
imagine
of
people are
ISB.
probably tired of seeing ISB.
And Paul, you're right. It was a little ambiguous in the wording. I hope I'm not kind of, talking outside of school here or whatever. But knowing some people working on the GIMP team, they've known the specifics of the errata for a little bit, and so they've been able to work on the coding for it. Again, don't want to make any promises that we can't make for sure, but it's probably safe to assume that the all of round 2 will be in the new meta with the post errata.
I think that's definitely their intention.
Yeah. Okay, so this has been a really fascinating turn for Steve. He gets the Corvette out. We see him also add Crix Maydeen as extra forfeit fodder on home one. And now he's dropped Ahsoka down to the 2-1. So Steve is really putting himself in a powerful position here. We did see that Greg played I Can't Shake Him to pull out Wolffield Laren so he could activate some more force. And obviously get another good forfeit body in space. But it's not looking great for Greg now because he is outpowered in space. He also doesn't even have immunity, so he's going to have to lose guys. And that Ahsoka can be pretty dangerous.
Yeah, she's just a great utility character. I mean, she's hard to kill. She's plenty of forfeit. It's not like this ISP deck has weapons. So you feel, especially with how many characters Greg has had to commit to space, I'm sure he feels very comfortable coming down with Ahsoka. I wouldn't be shocked to see a little bit of shuttling, maybe some of his passenger forfeit fodder, but he doesn't really need to.
Yeah, I mean, Ahsoka is very difficult to overflow. Basically impossible with the few cards that Greg has left. We do see a little shuttling. The real damage, or the real danger of Ahsoka, especially now that Chewie is there, is she can Jedi Presence, right? And so if you got Jedi Presence, I mean, this is very hard for Greg to crack. Oh, and Paul, sorry, I just saw the chat. We knew you weren't complaining. It's good to kind of get out that information so everyone knows what to expect for next week's games. And it's a good send off to our old meta this weekend, by the way, because we've got 3 more games today and 4 games tomorrow, I believe, and we're really got a lot of matches and some good action this weekend.
Steve, in all caps, says 1 sec piss. So I'll be back in a moment.
Very rude for him to call Greg piss like that. So do you think, Mike, that ISB is dead with the errata?
I don't think it's dead. I mean, Steve actually has been playing a similar build to this pre-slip sliding away that just started the system, as I recall, and 3 effects. And it's kind of a slow deck, but once it gets set up, and it can only take, I do think the removal of Walkling from Throne Room is also going to slow things down some. So no, I don't think it's dead. I think the reload version probably
right, because they don't
dead or very well neutered.
Yeah, those troopers look a lot worse when they're 2 deploy instead of 1 deploy.
Yeah, I think that deck probably is thankfully gone, or at least won't be nearly as prevalent. I do think this type of ISB can still be effective. It'll just have to pivot.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the problem though is that when they pivot is that this 2-0 site, they're now going to have to start a 2-1 site. And they have to give up a battleground. If this was a 2-1 the whole game, you could imagine that Steve would have deployed a lot earlier over there and really gotten some drain going.
Yeah, which is why. So I think if it would revert back to like what Steve played pre-slip sliding away, just start the 2-0 Coruscant system and heading for the medical or prepared defensive.
Well, sorry, just so you're clear, the errata is that you just can't start this 2-0 side. So there is a 2-1 Coruscant that you could start instead with slip sliding away.
Yeah, that just seems not particularly effective.
Right. You'd rather just not get the extra 2 icons and not give them an icon in the place screen.
Yes. The site, I think, is too much liability.
Got it. So we see that Ozzel got added to the executive as a pilot. And we see Blizzard 2 was added as forfeit fodder. And we see a battle that looks like Greg will be up by about 4 again, but again, both players are gonna have to lose characters.
Blizzard 2 might be like for a long game waiting to shuttle down at some point,
Right.
and he's just wanting to use his force.
Yep.
But yeah, so we're seeing the same kind of back and forth battle that we are going to continue to see on Greg's turn. Paul mentions light side specifically. So obviously we're seeing Throne Room taking a hit, lots of errata to no idea, which I also am fully supportive.
Yep.
I actually think no idea is still going to be a viable deck. It's just not going to be the same build.
I think no idea will still be fairly viable because I think it was just too good before. I think mainly the erratas to no idea are going to make it so that some of the tier 2 decks that couldn't fight it very well have a better chance to fight it. Like the change on the 7 side so that it just cancels a weapon and not a weapon destiny so that you can at least get one weapon successfully in. Whereas before they'd have to swing twice and maybe they missed one and then you cancel it. Like it was just too much. And
I thought the change was that it hits only your spies now and not all rebels.
Right. So it got tweaked basically in 3 ways. So it used to be cancel a weapon destiny targeting rebel. Now it's cancel a weapon targeting your spy, I believe. So one, Luke can't be protected by it anymore, which is really important. So like Agent Black Sun can go after Luke with weapons. But 2, one of the really annoying things about No Idea would be like you come at them with 2 weapons, but they're all defense value 4. So like if you're trying to shoot at them with like Dengar with plaster carbon, they could just wait to see if you hit before they canceled it. So the errata at least makes it so you don't get that advantage, and if they come out with 2 weapons, one of them can fire freely. Basically.
Yeah, you're correct. It is only spies now instead of all rebels, and so only spies notably also can make the regular move, and then it is cancel an attempt to target your non-undercover spy with a weapon, which everything you just said is true. You don't have to force them to hit first. So that's a pretty substantial change. It'll allow people to get.
And the big other change that will make it so decks like Hunt Down and Agent of Black Sun, I think, can compete a little bit better with the idea, is Saw can't cancel and interrupt anymore. So you would get these really ridiculous board states, especially at the beach, where like they've covered all their ground with everything. Like they've stopped weapons, with their objective. They've stopped multiple destinies with the evac control, and then you're like, well, okay, maybe I can hit him really hard with like some blowout interrupt. Maybe like you're beaten to remove a key character or something in battle, or a sniper in battle, and Saw would just cancel that. And so Saw not canceling interrupts anymore, I think again helps give people ways to fight the deck, but the best matchups at the top tier dark decks, at least, I think like Entanglement and Court obviously is going to be basically tier 0, weren't actually fighting No Idea in the way that it's been errated, and No Idea's strength is still really good against this. So I think No Idea is very valid. And then Paul, real quick, and I do want to comment on this game because we missed some important things here. Legend. I think everyone's expecting Legend to be the top deck.
So Greg shuttled down 5d6, which totally shuts down the drain until now Steve responds with Saw.
Yep.
And noticeably, Saw says drains cannot be reduced.
Right. They can still be
do not forget it. They can still be canceled. I know someone who forgot about that in an important game.
As you said, it's because you've only ever played Saw in a deck where they also couldn't be canceled. So it felt natural.
Yeah, your brain just sort of shortcuts certain, at least mine does frequently, those types of things. And so it's having Saw as an answer there is a pretty big game for Steve. Because notably, Greg is down to 12 in life force, 10 in hand. Steve is still sitting at 19 in life with 6 in hand.
Yeah, and also importantly, something that we missed when we were discussing the new meta was that Dark Time for Rebellion got grabbed. And so Greg has lost that as a thing that he could potentially cycle to try to, at least keep some parity on life force.
Which earlier in the game we were talking about how that probably wasn't the grab for Steve, but that was before he got Yoda in space. And so that basically the way this game has played out has made it to where Rebel leadership and command have been fairly inconsequential and now really are not doing anything.
Yeah, good patience by Steve. And Steve definitely showed that, he probably thought out pretty long term and realized, oh, this is going to be a really close game. We're going to be at parity, and something like Dark Time, if he could loop that, would probably break it open. So he was probably really, that battle where we thought, he's getting baited between leadership and command is probably never the grab that he wanted to do. Bill did suggest that maybe Tarkin's orders could be the next thing that gets looped, though, instead of Dark.
I don't think he's playing Tarkin's orders.
Also, you have to control the system for Tarkin's orders.
Yeah, you have to control it, and it needs to be in your 60 cards.
Yeah.
So I think it was in there at one point over the last few days, but I think it came out before even the match with Matt.
I wonder, I hate to be the pessimist here, but if Greg has to start thinking about differential.
Yeah, I think he does. But at this point, it's probably in his interest to keep. Steve's not really retrieving, right? So it's in his interest to try to grind this out as long as possible.
Yeah, Steve's
and make
not
this...
retrieving. He's probably grabbed the 2 used interrupts that, I think there's maybe we've seen quite a mercenary, we've seen Matter of Republic, so he could probably throw back a few more cards, but probably won't make too much of a difference. Sorry, 1 second.
So Greg's playing a Tarkin's Bounty, he gets the tunnel vision for something.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, Vengeance. I think...
Sorry. If he's tunnel visioning for something, Vengeance has to be the card if it's in his deck that he's looking for at this point. It's the best thing he could have to really try to break this open. There it is.
Yeah, so the second Star Destroyer.
Yep. So now he's pushing up in power and causing force loss because of Vengeance.
Yeah. So this was definitely Greg's best path to victory and/or his best path to minimizing differential. So, like, at this point, if Greg wins, it's going to be by not a lot of cards. But if he can just get more resources used from Steve and minimize Steve's win so that game 2 is really going to largely dictate the match.
Captain Valbird comes down, a very good character to add here as he adds 3 more power. I mean, at this point, literally, it's just a question of power. So we picked up a few more viewers. Welcome to the stream. And yes, we know that Mike is frozen on a very sexy pose. We apologize for the slight technical difficulty, but we're happy we still get in here. We see 5d6's game text canceled. Obviously, try to slow down Greg's drawing cards and activation. No reason not to use Chewbacca there. Destiny of 2 with...
So Greg's going to be 48 power.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out earlier, the nice thing about Vengeance is that it's going to force natural force loss through. So it's a way for Greg to actually get some damage in addition to making him lose a guy or 2 each battle.
Yep. So we see 48 to 4, or sorry, 48 to 40. So he's down by 8, plus he loses 1 to Vengeance. Now on this stack, home 1 stack, I'm sure there's someone with forfeit 8 you don't mind losing. Or maybe not forfeit 8. And 8's pretty high.
It's pretty high. I think Yoda might be one of the only guys.
Yoda's a 7.
There's no way he's going to lose Yoda.
Yoda's a 7.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah, or at least I'm pretty sure. Let me find him. Yeah, Yoda's a 7. And he wouldn't want to lose Yoda here anyway, so that would be pretty bad for him.
Yes, I said you wouldn't. I was just thinking none of these other guys would. It's interesting. You just taught me something I did not know about Kemp.
Which is you can click on cards?
That you can... Well, I've known about that, but I've never known that you could highlight a ship and see all the pilots and passengers like that.
Just for the record, the Corvette is a forfeit 8. So he's not on the Corvette.
I don't think he can afford to lose the Corvette.
No. So we see where's Han to bring Han back into his hand. Basically, kind of just let him recur some forfeit fodder. But he still has to lose another force, and basically loses a force that is where's Han plus another force.
And Greg lost Blizzard 2, signaling I'm not going to ground ever in this game.
Yeah, which obviously makes it pretty easy for Steve to lose Jedi Presence. Checking in on time, we see Greg has 22 minutes and Steve has 18 minutes, approximately.
I no longer think time is going to be any bit of a factor. The last 10 minutes or so that they've used in clock, the game has accelerated greatly.
Yeah, so we see these Adrena 2 here from Steve, with Saw stopping both the game text on the Cloud City side and 5d6. So we've got 15 cards in Force Pile for Steve, 5 cards in hand, so 20 total, 17 for Greg with 11 in his Life Force, 6 in his hand. So that would give, at this rate, it would give Greg about 17 force, approximately 8 turns or so. And so probably in the next 8 battles, he would not be able to clear out Bespin, but it'll be interesting.
He may, yeah. The other thing that it does afford him, though, is that he can also get through a substantial amount of force loss and whatnot through vengeance. So whoever wins this game, it's going to be by pretty low diff.
Yeah, which I think that's probably the best situation that Greg could hope for. He definitely was having some lows, and basically before last turn, before vengeance was added to the stack, things were not looking that great for him.
Notably, too, the format of this tournament is different than Texas Mini World. So both of these players have the opportunity to determine what to play in the next game based on the outcome of this game. Whereas in Mini Worlds, you had to send in your deck lists ahead of time. So Greg and Steve will know, hey, depending on what happens here, the amount they need to win by, and that's going to definitely dictate some card choices and potentially even the deck choices.
For sure, it makes a huge difference. I know. So we see Jin deployed to the 2, so that's really big, obviously, for Steve to try to with a Luke Rebel Scout.
Yeah, that's changes the tenor of the game considerably, given we were saying he had 8 turns. Now that gives him more like 3 turns.
Yeah, 2 or 3 really. Because now he's facing down drains at 5, 17, as we see Han back there as forfeit fodder. So now, basically, we see that Steve can feel fairly confident. He can probably just lose a couple guys from the system, right? He doesn't really need to keep losing life force for forfeit. So probably the only force left that Greg's been able to get would be a couple of battles from Vengeance.
I think you're right.
I mean, even at this point, something like Yoda could just be, say, forfeit fodder. Well, I wouldn't probably forfeit Yoda, but let's see. In the home one, we've got.
I don't think I would either.
We got Utani, who's forfeit 5 because of the aim high. We got Han, you could lose. Wedge is forfeit 6. You could lose that bar.
And all of his guys that are ability 3 get additional forfeit from Guts.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So
we missed that. Akbar is a forfeit 8. Yeah. So,
in retrospect, we should have known that last turn.
Yeah. It's like you have to know cards to talk about them on camera. It's a good point, though, what you said about how you can change decks. When I played my OCS match against Jared last week, I went in, since I was a higher seed, I knew my light side deck was set on that. But I had a couple different options lined up for dark, depending on how differential went. So, if I won big, perhaps a more cautious deck. If I lost big, I had a list where I was, kind of was going to be, had some ideas of maybe how I could try to be aggressive and make up the differential, along with just like a standard list.
And notably, I think they're not playing game 2 today. So
it's not scheduled. So unless they decide, I seriously doubt it because this game's taking so long.
I would be surprised. I think that Greg only said like this morning, that one game. So I would expect they'll have a break between, and that'll afford both players the time to strategize based on differential.
Yeah.
So Blizzard 4 comes down.
So actually, this goes back to a point that Paul pointed out in the chat earlier, that actually, when he lost Blizzard 2, while he signaled out to ground, unfortunately made it so that he now has to pay 1 force for everyone that he shuttles. Right. Instead, he could have loaded up people on Blizzard 2 and just shuttled down Blizzard 2 for 1 force. But now, he's going to basically have to get some forfeit fodder on the ground to try to, hold through what Steve might have there. He probably assumes that Steve doesn't have any more Jedi presence. We've seen 2 Jedi presences get lost off the top.
If I were Steve, just for style points, I may have retrieved the Jedi presence of Walkling and tried to 3PO it back this turn and put some hurt on.
Alright, so we see that Greg wins his battle by 9. Oh, sorry, by 11. So that's going to be
11.
2 guys. 1 force from reserve.
2 guys in a loss of force.
Yeah. But it's only 3 force for Greg to shuttle guys down. Maybe only 2 if he wants to try to retrieve a guy with his objective. That's a
I would expect to see that.
Retrieval.
2 guys in a retrieve.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a pretty well, no, because it'd only be 1 guy in a retrieve unless he doesn't want to keep Blizzard 4 around, right? So.
Good call. Yes, when he's definitely going to want to keep that around.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty tough spot there. And unfortunately, adding more guys just makes Saul better. So Saul will increase attrition. So, and he basically has to kind of hold on as tight as he can and just hope that next battle isn't one where he gets cleared out of that site. So we see Steve misclick putting Radis in the last pile. Yeah, he now understands why Greg announced he was losing in advance. So we'll see a revert here, which unfortunately the reverts here take a minute because you have to go back kind of far to hit the battle damage segment of losing.
That's always the most frustrating thing is to have to revert at the end of a battle like this.
Well, fortunately, the GIMP team has just been incredible the last couple months. So, they've been very busy getting, the playtesting cards together and errata together, but they've been adding lots of new features. I think mad props to Adam Fletcher, Echo Base Trooper, who joined that team when it went open source and just really has been incredible adding a lot of new features to GIMP. So we should definitely as I'm sure they know, as they're pretty active players. I bet if we tell them, verbalize like, oh, this is a feature that'd be really nice if it could really make space battles a little bit more manageable. It won't surprise me if we see that happen in the near future.
Give the people what they want.
Let's see if okay, yeah. So Steve meant to lose Yutani and Han, so pretty easy 4-foot fodder for him to choose from there. That's our interesting choice here for Greg will be to see who he settles down.
So are you commentating other matches this weekend? Do you want to tee up kind of when things are happening?
So at 2:00 today, we have Eric.
2:00 Eastern time.
2:00 Eastern, yes, thank you. 2:00 Eastern time today. We have Eric Hunter versus Joe Olson, which I bet Paul you'd be interested in watching, as that's your you play the winner of that matchup in round 2 of OCS. They're going to play both games back to back, so that should be a fun matchup. Eric and Joe are teammates on the team 5, so I'll be curious to see who they what they bring to a match where they both know each other's decks probably pretty well. And then at starting about 4:30 Eastern, though it might start a little bit later at 5 Eastern, we have the Euro Grudge match section of the OCS with Justin Brandt, Silverglin, playing 3-time world champion Bastian Winkelhaus. They will play game 1. And then tomorrow at about, I believe it's 3 p.m., they'll play game 2. And then also tomorrow, Justin Desai and Tom Damon will be playing. I need to check the schedule on that. I think they're playing at like 2:00 Eastern.
So notably, we see Callus come down, which is probably the best character for Greg to shuttle. And then he follows that up with a trample on Saw Gerrera.
Okay.
So
he's established
put himself he's put himself in a much better position of this site. He's still facing down that drain of 3.
Right. Yeah, it's
so lots of great Star Wars going on this weekend.
Yeah, lots of good Star Wars, and it is the last hurrah for this meta. But we're seeing. I mean, these are some real top player matchups with Bastion and Silverglin, and also Eric and Joe playing. I mean, these are arguably 4 of the top 10 players who are playing right now in matchups against each other. And obviously Tom Damon is no slouch if he qualified, and of course Desai is one of the best players in the game. And so even though this is the last weekend for the meta, it's pretty exciting to watch these players play each other. And that's kind of the nature of the OCS, which is pretty exciting. Which is it's not because players are ranked based on how they finish throughout the whole season. You can get honestly what we think of as like grinder type players who play a lot, getting an opportunity to avoid having they get a higher draft pick, so they get to pick players who they might think are weaker. But then someone like, for example, Eric Hunter, who's a very good player, he just played 1 month, qualified, and didn't play any more games. So he was a lower seed, and he didn't have a choice. He was gonna, he didn't get to pick.
I like Eric's style. He's like, he probably got interested, and I know he's probably busy with work, but I also think part of it is like, feel free to take me if I'm the last seed. I'm not afraid.
Unfortunately for him, him and Joe were literally the last two left. So he did not get to avoid playing his teammate because there was no at that point. In fact, this matchup we're watching here between two excellent players, Steve Baroni, Steve Baroni had the last pick in the sense that he had to choose between Greg Shaw, Joe Olsen, and Eric Hunter. And, it was probably a pretty strong strategic pick. I don't know Steve Baroni's opinion on other players. I'm sure he thinks that Greg Shaw is an excellent player, as we all do. But he probably thought, it might be pretty advantageous for him and for his teammate Justin Desai to go ahead and have Eric and Joe play each other first round. So that these two guys who are teammates have to knock one or the other out early on, and so they don't, potentially get to, have two good players on both sides of the bracket.
I definitely think that played into the decision 100%. And then on top of that, Steve and Greg are friendly. So Steve probably was also, if he's going to have to deal with scheduling a match and or if he is going to lose, he'd probably rather deal with all of that happening with Greg.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. I had the same sort of opinion when thinking about who I wanted to match up with, and that in the end, while we all play this game competitively and we all want to win, we also like playing people that we're friendly with. It's enjoyable. So we see Lando gets added to home one. Again, this would just be basically for forfeit fodder, if he's not going to add the power when he's piloting home one when they get in a battle.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
But no cards in hand, so no exchange. So with 14 total life force for Greg, 10 in life force, 4 in hand, and a drain 3, he can hold out for a couple of more turns. But he now also has he has satisfied simple tricks, so he gets retrieval.
Correct. And he may be able to dig back for that trample and trample Chewie.
Yeah, which would be
which would give him at least a much better footing to stay alive.
And no cards in hand, so
win some battles.
And Jedi presence is not a threat with no cards in hand.
Right. So we'll see what Greg chooses to do here.
Yeah, he has options. I think he doesn't have a lot of options for guys left, so I don't think he has anyone great to add to the site. I think Greg would probably be pretty happy to just continue to have a stare down at the site, so he can satisfy basically. So he's satisfying simple tricks and keep retrieving someone every turn to mitigate the damage from the site, and then try to break through the system. Right? I mean, he's now up by 11 at the system. He's causing damage with vengeance. But it's close. I mean, this is definitely closer than it was just a turn ago. And by the way, you see
Adam mentioned in the chat that it's possible they could do like an "Are you sure?" message when forfeiting from a ship. I feel like
that would help a lot.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to be able to turn that feature on or off.
Yeah. We have that message now. Like if you try to click the ship first, it does say, "Are you sure you want to forfeit the ship?" It's like it'll say like
nice.
you're going to forfeit the ship that you still have passengers on it. You could forfeit instead. Which is funny because what is it? Gik and Hujix also have that message. If you go to lose them as battle damage, I believe it'll say like, "You sure you mean to lose this card as battle damage?"
Interesting.
Yeah, it says something. I think the exact message is like, "You are losing this card as battle damage, and that is not normally how this card is lost," or something like that. Are you sure you want to proceed?
I'm always happy when it's like, "You have not activated force."
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Because I've done that multiple times.
No, I mean it's funny. There's obviously a line there, right? Because what you want to do is have warnings for things that are gonna happen because GIMP is the way GIMP is, right? You don't want to actually
Exactly.
change people the way people are playing. If it's a mistake you would make in person, you want them to be able to make that mistake in GIMP if possible. But in person, I would never accidentally forfeit the wrong guy off my ship, right? I would never just be like, oh, I mean to lose Han, but I accidentally grabbed Yutani and put him in my lost pile. So obviously,
and if you did, it would be a matter of like very quickly saying, "Oh, that's Yutani," and you would just swap them, right? It's like when Steve played another pathetic life form earlier. That would never happen.
Right.
So Greg has activated all but 2,
which
and is
terrified Steve into leaving the room.
Oh, geez. Yeah, so Steve is disconnected, and his clock is ticking.
Hopefully he'll come back soon. Unfortunately, Greg is a good guy, and I'm sure he would give him extra time if he could, but I'm pretty sure these OCS matches are such you cannot give extra time.
All right, he's rejoined. Notably, he does have only 10 minutes left on his clock, but I anticipate with that drain of 3, it's going to be moot.
Yeah, between a drain of 3 and no cards in his hand. He said his power went out. Lucky his power came back so quickly.
Sometimes that happens in my house. Like the power will flicker for a second and then come right back. And then you're just waiting for your router. You're just waiting for your router to reconnect at that point.
Ghost. All right. So right now, board states stay the same. Who's going to win? Not board states stay the same, but with the current board state, who do you think is going to win?
I think it will be a narrow victory for Steve.
I think that's right too.
Greg has done a really good job of forcing Steve to continue to commit resources and to grind him down as much as possible.
Yeah.
And Steve has done a really good job of having answers and loading up safely.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an interesting. So now that he's down to board state as it is was a critical thing to mention there. So now, I mean, this is a guaranteed drain on his next turn since Steve has no cards in hand.
Yeah, that's huge. Hitting the 3 there.
Bigly.
See, in every battle here, he does give the retrieval to Lando, which will cancel out the vengeance damage. But he's up by 11, so it'll probably be another 2 guys he has to peel. Yeah, that ice hard makes a big difference there. Because really, I don't know who would Steve have left in his deck who can take on ice hard. He probably doesn't have like a random Qui-Gon, right? He's unlikely to have a very expensive EPP like that. But I guess Qui-Gon is someone you can Jedi Presence with.
Yeah, he's a Jedi, so it's reasonable you would have him in his deck. But it's not a guarantee.
Yeah, there's so many characters you already played, and of course the challenging thing is he has no cards in hand. And so like if he wants to start drawing cards to find characters, then he might not have enough life force left to actually, deploy things. And that's legitimately tough. Hopefully Steve is not disconnected again and just he's in the tank thinking if he wants to use Lando or not. I'd definitely be ashamed to see a game end on a disconnect.
No kidding. His clock is ticking. He's sub 8 minutes now. Yeah. Okay. He decided not to retrieve.
Yeah. I feel like one of my strengths as a player is that I'm very fast. I think it's also one of my weaknesses. But I feel like I don't really get into time situations on GIP ever. But it's tough.
I play much faster in person than I do on GIMP, but that's mostly me, again, being terrified of misclicking.
Yeah. Oh, man. I can't wait till I actually play in person. It's been so long. I'm going to be so bad.
So Greg draws a 5. It's going to be 47 power.
And then he draws a 6 because of Ray, so 47 to 37. Interestingly, Chewbacca Protector was not used on 5d6. Is that because Callus? Yeah, you can't cancel Callus. I think it was maybe just an oversight. You didn't cancel 5d6.
Steve debated about retrieving and instead used Ray to draw his 1 card in force pile, probably hoping that is a character that can come down.
Agreed.
Jedi Council Chamber.
Agreed. Yeah, I was thinking of that when I was saying, oh, maybe he disconnected. It wasn't a disconnect. It was a serious in the tank moment, right? because that 1 force can make a huge difference in this game. But obviously, a drain of 3 is going to be really hard for him to. So he's probably going through his head, like, okay, how many characters do I have left? I only got maybe 1 or 2. The likelihood it's there is really small, but you take that 1 in 12 chance that that character is there. Also, he's seen almost every card. He's definitely seen every card in his deck at this point, so he probably has a decent idea if it's there. And so he's really, trying to basically calculate the odds. Another. So Greg has to 6 attrition, so he can lose a guy here. Let's see.
So we'll see Greg lose a guy. He'll retrieve in his draw phase and probably draw a card or 2.
Well, only 1 card if you retrieve.
Only 1 because of Blizzard Force. So yeah, he may or may not draw. It depends on if he knows what's in his deck, and he has only 9 life force left. So
yeah, but we're at parity 13-13, and Greg's got the Ice Heart at the 3-0 and a damage every turn at least with Vengeance. So Greg is definitely ahead here. It's gonna be pretty big next turn to see if the card that Steve drew is a character.
regardless, it's going to be a very narrow victory for either side.
Thanks again to everyone who tuned in this morning to watch this game and get a sexy profile shot of Mike on your screen.
Hopefully that brought much joy to the world.
Attrition to that battle damage. He's basically deciding which 2 guys he's going to lose. Let's see. Probably Lando is probably an easy loss. He probably doesn't want to have to keep saving the force every turn for Lando. And that would also include saving the force for both maintenance and retrieval. Potentially Wedge until potentially Wedge.
It brought joy to Nick, at least. So I've done some good today.
Yeah, man. If you memed yourself, I think we're in a good spot.
Within like 5 minutes of someone saying it, I got a message on Slack that Crazy Runner guy had already screenshotted it, and people, yeah, there's going to be plenty of use from this picture, I'm sure.
Well, this wasn't the by the way, we kept saying this was the most exciting game. This has been a great game, I think, actually.
It's actually turned out to be very interesting the way it played. The mid game, when it was just like we're throwing everything onto the ship for a little bit, there were a few turns that maybe weren't the most compelling, but overall it's actually been a clinic in terms of how to grind, how to stack, how maneuvering, maximizing damage.
And I totally appreciate and understand that a lot of players are tired of this type of game because there's so many decks that play like this right now. ISB, Legend, Court, Throne Room, they're all these big stack games. And, I think we're all kind of excited to maybe have the meta shift away from this. But there is something very compelling about seeing 2 of the top players in the game play these large stacks and having to really position things and really think through all their turns like that. That turn with, Baroni really had to go in the tank over 1 force. It really mattered if he was going to retrieve or if he was going to use Ray to try to draw and find something there. And those sort of little micro decisions, I think, are really what separate players from the very best from just very good.
So Steve gets to use Ray again on his turn. He's now up to 2 cards in hand. Notably, he left 2 cards in reserve deck, hoping to either draw. He either got a character last turn or is hopefully hoping to find one here and allowing himself outs to battle.
Well, his 3PO's been 3PO's been on Class A. So we know that he has some options.
Notice another top player paying 3PO in his throne room deck, Drew.
Thank you, Mike. For context, I'm not a huge fan of 3PO in a lot of throne room lists, but obviously some good players, Steve included, really like 3PO. I forget the list you were discussing. There was some very specific reason in your list I don't like 3PO. Oh, because you're playing must be allowed to speak version of Throne Room. You already had use pile polls, and I felt like it was overkill.
I don't think it's ever overkill to find all the cards you want.
Touche. Well, we'll probably see more. I don't know if we'll see more 3PO or not. If Throne Room continues to be a viable deck, it'll be interesting to see.
So notably, Steve is in the tank again. He's down to 5 minutes on the clock.
Yep. I don't know if someone in the chat could let us know how timing out works. I believe Greg would get a win on life force and cards in hand. Does anyone know if that's correct?
I'm gonna look up. I'll pull up the forums and see the rules.
Pretty sure, which is reasonable. I mean, he certainly shouldn't be punished with some like -25 or arbitrary number in a close game if you time out. And so assuming those 3 cards are cards that he could return as life force, I think makes sense.
Extensions are not allowed. You're correct about that.
I guess I understand why extensions aren't allowed, because you don't want people to feel like they could be peer pressured into not allowing a time extension. But I think I would probably be okay with it if they could allow them.
From what I'm seeing, at least just on first blush, like going through the main post and then the top 16 post, it doesn't actually specify what should happen in terms of differential and if it were to go to a timeout.
I believe, and again, I'm sure someone here would know, but I think it's cards in hand plus
added to
life force. Yeah.
That's how it was in Texas Mini Worlds. I don't know for certain if that rule follows through here. I think it's a reasonable rule, but
and in this game at least would be a decent approximation for what Greg would probably win by. Obviously if that drain of 3 isn't blocked. So if Steve doesn't have a way to block that drain of 3, I think it's a reasonable approximation that he would win by approximately that. He'd actually win by a lot less.
He'd win by less. He has 11 cards. I mean, Steve will probably get a couple drains in. He'd probably win by like 4.
Nick, probably he realizes his time is low. Unfortunately, Steve did have a power outage earlier, so we're all kind of hoping that's not what happened here. That he's just really in the tank trying to figure out how he wants to make his next move.
Yeah, the hope is he's actually sitting there thinking, like, what are my outs? What can I do? Because, I mean, you can actually get a decent amount of play in 3 minutes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, especially if you...
here comes Hobby.
Yep, okay. So he was probably in the tank debating whether to add Hobby as forfeit fodder to Bespin or to just throw Hobby in front of Ice Hard, would be my guess.
Yeah. Which... I actually think I like it against Ice Hard more.
Yeah, because he has a gun, right? So if he's tracted, he could just shoot Ice Hard, and Hobby's got pretty high forfeit.
Right, he's forfeit 4 naturally, right? And with Insurrection, he'd be a forfeit 5.
Yeah, so it's not going to take overflow. I mean,
odds are he would not take overflow.
If anything, he'd be able to kill Ice Hard, unless he's tracked those destinies, and we know that he can't hit Ice Hard. But we see him move Jin over to get another drain, so he's trying to hit on the drains there.
Well, and then on the subsequent turn, he can move in front of Ice Hard.
Right. Yeah, I'm surprised Hobby's not blocking Ice Hard. He could even it might even just be right if he doesn't if he's tracked the destinies and know he can't hit Ice Hard. It might even be correct to just throw Ice Hard, or to throw Hobby in front of Ice Hard, because it's very unlikely that Greg has a second guy to add to that site to
exactly
an overflow battle, especially because he needs to, or he would want to keep battling at that point. So certainly not saying it's wrong. I think importantly, by the way, we should finish the thought of why he did it. He shuttled Yoda down. So the reason why he added Hobby is so now he can cancel with Way. And with Yoda obviously at the site, he can start canceling. And Tarkin is gone, right? So basically the Hobby play is to make it so that he can potentially
Wedge online.
Yeah, put Wedge online. Potentially he could, maybe even win the battles in space at that point. With Rey adding 1 to his.
Also, he has the potential with Obi-Wan. He can recur Jedi presence go for Obi-Wan.
That's true. That's right. Yeah, I mean, Obi-Wan's online now with multiple cards in hand. So I'm sure Steve knows his lost pile well and can think about what sort of tool decks he'd want from him. He's just losing cards off reserve. So Steve down to 1 minute 40.
And 6 in Life Force to 9 in Greg's. So
Greg's
if
hitting,
Greg is able to win, again, either way, this is going to be such a close game. It's largely going to come down to what happens in the next game, it seems, from a differential standpoint.
uses Walkling here to retrieve a force to at least buy him another turn. So Steve will be dark side in the next game, and Greg's already playing basically the ISB deck that Steve has played a lot. Vader versus Jen.
So this would have made our hobby to the 3-0 pretty embarrassing.
A pretty bad play. Yes, it would have. But to be fair, the cards he lost off the top, let's see, he was lost Wisa, Launching Assault, and Leadership. He still could have played hobby and shot Ice Hard, and it would have worked out for him.
Yeah.
So we got Vader versus Jen. Obviously, Jen doesn't draw after Vader cancels. And Greg draws the Cold Feet that he tracked. So now, but Jen is forfeit +1 because of Guts. So Jen satisfies. Obviously, the strip.
But notably, he can move Vader in front of Luke.
He can move Vader in front of Luke. Yep. No, a really strong play here for. He can move Vader in front of Luke, and he can pay for maintenance on Blizzard 1. So he's got to be a little careful. I guess if he exchanges 2 cards with Obi, maybe picks up Jedi Presence, he could add 1 guy, battle, double power, but then he's losing 2 cards to get the Jedi Presence and probably isn't causing overflow. So it's a pretty safe
And he has to
play.
do that in 1 minute and 8 seconds.
Yeah, it's a pretty safe play here for Greg to move Vader in front of Luke. Obviously,
you see Greg just shuttle a guy down, honestly, to just not get exposed to that Jedi Presence. Like, the more forfeit he has on the ground at this point, the better.
I imagine that's what he's really thinking deeply about here. No, he did Vader in front of Luke.
Okay. It's a critical he doesn't lose this second battleground. It would take substantial. I mean, it's 2 cards from Steve's hand, really, is all it takes to trade for another. So he's losing 2 cards from hand if he goes that line. He may not. And he has to get through his turn. He is down to 57 seconds now.
Yeah.
It's funny. I said I thought time might be a factor with like 30 minutes on Steve's clock. And then 5 minutes later said, oh, no way it's going to be a factor. And here we are with.
Unfortunately, Steve did have a little of a power outage. It wasn't very long. He was only out of the game for a couple of minutes, but it was, unfortunately, in this situation, a couple of minutes probably matters a decent amount.
Yeah, it was maybe 2 to 3 minutes. It wasn't a huge amount of time, but it's not an irrelevant amount.
So if he Jedi Presence is here, he goes up to 34 power, right?
So he would do it off of Yoda, and so Obi would be power 10.
I could do this.
Ahsoka would be
Yoda.
power
so
10.
It would be 17 doubled would be 34 plus the 3 from Yoda. So you'd be at 37 power. I mean, it's not going to matter, unfortunately.
Isn't Chewie power 8? Oh, he's not ability 3. Excuse me.
Yeah. I mean, there's 20 power at the site. You subtract 3 from Yoda. 17. It only doubles Rebels, right? So you're not going to double 3PO.
I think it only doubles Rebels, so it wouldn't double 3PO, but it doubles the others.
Unfortunately.
So you'd be like 30.
And unfortunately, we do see the timeout here. So that's tough, unfortunately, for Steve.
So it's going to be a win of 9 or 10 for Greg. Yeah, that stinks.
Yeah, or 1 of 10. And they're asking what happens. Steve is complaining about why he hates this game. Unfortunate. But a great game up until then. Really good kind of matchup with a lot of positioning back and forth.
Yeah, they also don't know what the correct outcome should be.
Yeah. I don't want to type in here because I'm not sure. I'm sure it's posted somewhere. Otherwise, Google and I imagine we'll know. It is possible we might not even see a game 2. I know this happened with Steve in Texas Mini Worlds when he lost game 1 to Joe. He just wasn't particularly interested in playing game 2 after that. So we'll have to kind of wait and see what they do.
Waiting to see if there's any more commenting in the game. Yeah. Otherwise, you'll see game 1 here. Likely, I imagine it might have the same rules as Texas Mini Worlds, where it's a difference of 1 differential either way. So it's going to be 9 or 10.
Yep. Steve just says, "Whatever, I'm out," and that's the end of that. So it'll probably be a differential of 10 for Greg. My guess is that Steve will be not interested in playing game 2, but could be wrong. So we can kind of wait and see how it goes.
Well, you never know. He's probably just tilted. It wouldn't be surprised to me if he calms down and decides, hey, sure. 10's not insurmountable.
Right. Yeah, I believe the loss to Joe was a loss of about 17 or so.
And I'm not even sure that he, I think life may have gotten in the way more than anything there, and not that he didn't want to continue.
Yeah, I mean,
playing.
Honestly, looking at the board state, I don't think he was. Where else is Steve going to be doing damage in the next couple turns? He's going to have to clear that Vader somehow. That would be kind of the key thing. If he can clear that Vader and then get back that drain of 3, then he could maybe instead lose by 4 or 5 instead of 10.
Yeah, it would have probably been slightly less, but still likely a win for Greg. The official PC channel said they're double checking, but it's likely 10.
Okay.
So keep an eye on the forums. I'm sure that
we'll post
Slack. I'm sure it'll get announced somewhere.
Yeah, and if they do play game 2, we'll definitely have it covered here on stream. And thanks, Mike. This was fun.
Drew, do you just want to remind everybody again when the next stream is today?
Yes, the next stream today is at 2:00, 2 p.m. Eastern, and that will be Eric Hunter versus Joe Olsen. And I believe it'll be streamed on this channel. We'll have we'll tweet out from the announcement Twitter so everyone knows. I know that Jeremy and Taco Bell, if he's going to be awake for it, will be doing commentary.
Hand plus Life Force, it's confirmed. So it'll be 10.
Got it. Okay. Well, obviously, kind of a unfortunate way that this ended, but and it's certainly not insurmountable. So likely to see a game 2 here between Greg and Steve, and if so, we'll bring it to you then. Otherwise, we hope to see everyone back here at 2:00. And thanks, Mike. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Yeah.